Together, a reflection on power, inequality, and our shared future. Abstract, the quest. My quest for why the world wants more nuclear power instead of negotiating for peace. I hope that the time has come to pause the power struggle for peace negotiation, peace with their neighbors. Maybe it is time to tune down the action of power to negotiate for peace. Let peace come from a piece of pie, the act of sharing what we have for friendship, trying to imagine how we can all have peace. Our world is changing to give us happiness, but we are not measuring up to the change for peace because of greed. Why do some have mansions and others have none? And why do some have nuclear power and others not? We have come from power through strength, from acts of resilience to keep fighting until we achieve the justice that was denied for many, from genocide and slavery to nation and freedom. We need to progress to peace on Earth instead of wanting more nuclear weapons for power. Introduction: the question behind the arms. I keep circling the same riddle. Why do so many leaders argue that we need more nuclear power and bigger arsenals instead of deeper negotiations? I don't mean a naive surrender. I mean the brave, unglamorous craft of peacemaking, listening, bargaining, and walking back from the cliff. Maybe this is the moment to pause the theater of strength and turn down the volume to seek peace with our neighbors before the next siren drowns out our better judgment. I picture peace like a shared pie, simple, ordinary, nourishing. If we can learn to slice fairly, to trade a portion of what we have for a portion of trust, the world changes flavor. I try to imagine how everyone might have a seat at that table. The world keeps transforming technology, wealth, the reach of our voices, yet our appetite for peace lags behind our capacity for power. Too often, greed and fear tip the scale. Power, inequality, and the mirage of security. Why do some live in mansions while others sleep without shelter? Why do some countries brandish nuclear weapons while others are told to accept vulnerability? Inequality is not just about money or missiles. It is about who is heard and who is hushed. Power promises security, but often it delivers anxiety stockpiles as monuments to mistrust. We have inherited a world built on resilience and resistance, people who refuse to stay silent in the face of genocide, slavery, occupation, and systematic injustice. From those struggles, nations rose and freedoms were claimed. Yet the lesson we carry forward should not be more power at any cost, but never again to the machinery that dehumanizes. Justice is not a finish line we cross once and forget. It is a daily practice, the discipline of repairing what history has broken, the logic of deterrence and its limits. I understand the familiar argument. Nuclear weapons deter wars between great powers. But deterrence is not a moral vision. It is a ceasefire held hostage. It asks us to trust that accidents will never happen, that miscalculations will stay theoretical, and that human error will somehow sit out history. It tolerates permanent terror as a reasonable trade for temporary order. We can do better. Security that depends on annihilation is an architecture of paradox. It keeps us standing, yes, but on a ledge. It claims to prevent catastrophe by normalizing the capacity for it. That tension cannot hold forever without fraying our humanity. Choosing the work of peace. Peace is not a mood. It is a muscle. It strengthens with practice. Negotiation is craft. Real talks, persistent and specific, about borders, resources, and dignity. Not photo ops, but frameworks that survive elections. Arms control is bridge. Verifiable steps that reduce arsenals and risks while building habits of trust. Inspection, verification, communication hotlines. Economic fairness is foundation. When basic needs are met and inequality narrows, fear loosens its grip. It is harder to weaponize despair. Shared science and climate action as common cause. Cooperation on existential threats. Pandemics, warming seas, fragile grids can turn rivals into partners against a larger enemy. Education for empathy. teaching history honestly, including harms done and harms endured, so we resist dehumanizing our opponents. None of this is dramatic. It is the workday of peace. The paperwork, the patience, the deadlines no one cheers. But it is how suspicion becomes structure. Reframing strength. Real strength is not the ability to destroy. It is the capacity to refrain. It is the credibility to defend without dominating, to protect without provoking, to concede without capitulating. Nations can lead by setting limits on themselves, the way a good neighbor respects a fence but still shares a ladder. There is a reason we admire those who build hospitals more than those who sharpen swords. One extends life, the other threatens it. Our metrics are off when we celebrate the size of a stockpile more than the strength of a safety net. What if our prestige came from preventing famine, powering schools with clean energy, or erasing a disease? What if the headline that moves markets were not a missile launch, but a multilateral pact that measurably reduces risk? From scarcity to sharing. The metaphor of the pie matters. Greed is a story about scarcity. There will not be enough, so take more now. Peace tells a different story. We have enough when we share. Sharing is not charity, it is infrastructure. It is trade fairness, debt relief tied to reforms, anti-corruption with teeth, technology transfer that empowers rather than extracts. It is also cultural, a willingness to let the dignity of others be as urgent as our own. When people feel seen and secure, they are less eager for strongmen who sell fear as patriotism. When communities can heat their homes, learn online, vote safely, and trust courts, the sales pitch for bigger bombs loses its shine. A global pledge worth making. If we can move from power through fear to security through fairness, we shift the incentives. Imagine a standing global compact that rewards negotiated settlements with investment, opens access to green tech for demobilization milestones, and pairs arms reductions with education exchanges and cultural visas. Imagine neighbors choosing to co-manage rivers, grids, and fiber lines because the future pays better than the feud. We do not erase the past. We honor it by refusing to repeat it. The arc from atrocity to nationhood to freedom should bend again toward inclusion, cooperation, and restraint. I am not asking the world to be unarmed. I am asking it to be unafraid, to choose the slower courage of conversation over the quick tremor of escalation, to measure greatness not by how loudly we threaten, but by how quietly we keep our promises. Let us tune down the spectacle of power and turn up the practice of peace. Let the piece of pie be literal and symbolic. A fair slice, a fair chance, a fair says. If we learn to share what we have, we may yet find what we've been searching for. Not victory, but home. Author Modupe Olasengbe Sarat, Project Manager for MVMNTA. Maria Virtual Medical and Telehealth Assistant. February 19, 2026.
This video, titled Piecing Peace Together, is a reflection on power, inequality, and our shared future by Modupe Olasengbe Sarat. The author critiques the current distribution of power and wealth, questioning why some nations and individuals possess excessive power, like nuclear weapons, while others suffer from vulnerability and poverty. Inequality is viewed as a failure of justice. We must move beyond the logic of nuclear deterrence. This approach perpetuates fear and mistrust, hindering true security. The document advocates for a shift away from reliance on destructive power. Achieving peace requires deliberate, ongoing effort. This involves negotiation, arms control, economic fairness, shared scientific and climate action, and education for empathy. These actions are essential for building trust and reducing fear globally. True strength is found in restraint and cooperation, prioritizing life over destruction. Nations should focus on building infrastructure, addressing inequality, and fostering global partnerships rather than stockpiling weapons. The metaphor of a shared pie emphasizes that peace comes from equitable sharing of resources, fair trade, and mutual respect. We must replace greed and fear with collaboration and dignity for all. The author envisions a global compact that rewards peace efforts with investment, access to green technology, and cultural exchanges, promoting inclusion and cooperation worldwide. This visual summary highlights the reflection on power, inequality, and our shared future. The case for peace over power requires persistent negotiation, addressing economic inequality, and collaborative efforts on global challenges. Reframing strength means prioritizing humanitarian efforts and equitably sharing resources. Only through collective commitment can humanity embrace a future defined by respect, justice, and enduring peace. Education and dialogue are essential for dismantling prejudice and nurturing a global community grounded in empathy and cooperation.